Let me read you a story from, of all places, Pravda. Henry Kissinger came to Moscow to discuss new financial system with Putin. On February 3rd, 2016, that's just a few weeks ago, Russian President Vladimir Putin had a meeting with Henry Kissinger, a U.S. diplomat, former national security advisor, and U.S. Secretary of State. I want to read a couple of paragraphs from this. It's not that I agree with everything they say, but it is indicative of where we are headed. What was the point of Henry Kissinger's visit to Moscow? Rumor has it that the meeting was devoted to global strategic objectives. Of course, it was an important visit because Kissinger is an outstanding figure in American politics. The Bushes come and go, but people like Henry Kissinger stay. Such visits never happen for personal reasons. I'm going to stop the quote there. They're absolutely right. This is where the real back-channeling happens. Let's jump down a couple of paragraphs. Most likely it was a meeting about the Middle East, Russia, oil prices, and Ukraine. These questions don't require Kissinger's presence in Moscow. In the Middle East, we can now eyewitness the establishment of the balance of all global forces. Putin and Kissinger met before in 2013. Kissinger remains in very good shape intellectually. In his interviews, he always appears very reasonable and thoughtful. Henry Kissinger represents a certain group of the U.S. political elite that includes the Bush clan. The world is rapidly moving towards the destruction of the current financial system. In these circumstances, those who own budgets of entire nations are looking for opportunities to save their money so that this money works when the current financial system disappears and a new financial system emerges. It should be understood that while the whole world, and unfortunately Russia, is involved in conflicts and political games, the Americans believe that it is they who set the rules of these games. They are also elaborating the rules for the time when the global domination of the U.S. dollar ends. The U.S. is now trying to change the world to the post-dollar world. Obviously, the world will no longer be global. With Putin, the Americans intend to establish tandem cooperation despite the extremely aggressive political rhetoric against Russia. The U.S. and Russia still cooperate on vital issues in most sensitive areas, including war, oil, investment, technology, etc. A variety of economic associations are being created now, and the Americans want to be leaders everywhere. BRICS, the Transatlantic Partnership, etc. They are working on all this very actively. In this battle, due to the fact that the U.S. debt is snowballing, rescuing the U.S. economy is impossible. Even if the whole Middle East is set on fire, we can see the two clans fighting to death, the Bushes and the Clintons. In this sense, the upcoming elections in the U.S. will probably be the last, because America may change to become an absolutely different nation. In this battle, Madam Clinton is stronger. Henry Kissinger, who was currently in the Bush clan, came to Moscow to see what Russia finds more attractive: Clinton's new global world order, or a more nationally oriented position of the Bush clan. Clearly, the new world order, according to the Clintons, and all sorts of societies, such as the Soros Foundation, are less acceptable for Russia. Henry Kissinger came to Russia at the time of the brutal struggle between two groups of bankers. The loser will have to deal with tens of trillions of dollars of U.S. debt. While America is sinking to the bottom with its overwhelming debt, it needs to destroy someone inside to make them responsible for all those debts. Interesting to see this from a Russian point of view. Let's see if we can summarize what's behind the lines here in what you're reading. Number one, they recognize that the current financial system is coming to an end. I agree with that. Its end may be pretty violent or turbulent, let's put it that way. It may result in some violence, but it's going to be much more turbulent. Number two, they believe that the American debt situation is no longer manageable. The debt is snowballing, it's runaway, we will not be able to service it all, and therefore some kind of an implosion is coming when we have to reset the entirety of everything, and the fighting that's going to result to see who's going to be left standing when that actually happens. Number three, some of the big money brokers, as he's calling them here, the Bush clan versus the Clinton clan, as they see it from Russia, they're fighting over who's going to be last man standing. You saw some of this in what happened after the crash in 2007 and 2008, when Occupy Wall Street blamed the big bankers on Wall Street or the Wall Street investors. You still hear echoes of that in Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton today. What they fail to point out, as did FDR back then, is the system was set up to make you and me the holders of last resort of all of the debt and the problems that these people benefit from. So in essence, they benefit, and if necessary, we're penalized. The failure is to recognize that it's a game. It's a game that goes on between the Congress and our Treasury Department, the Federal Reserve, and the private banking establishment in Wall Street. This is the three-way ring that we are facing, and people fail to understand that. Nevertheless, when the whole thing blows out, when the music stops, there aren't enough chairs, and somebody has to be demonized in order to capitalize on their money to get the whole system jump-started. Number 4, we are going to have a new system. They're working on it. And that's what the shuttle diplomacy, the back channeling going on right now between, say, for example, Henry Kissinger and Vladimir Putin is all about. They're shucking and jiving for position, understanding where we are headed. And meanwhile, and this is why you have to understand the insanity of it, Obamacare is promising us, well, it was promising us free health care, but almost all of the promises that we were promised about Obamacare are subsequently turning out very rapidly to be lies. Meanwhile, Senator Sanders wants to promise everybody free education at the collegiate level. Both Hillary and Bernie have great eyes for more taxes to load the U.S. economy, as the middle class here is just struggling to stay afloat, because it's the middle class that carries 90% of the jobs in the country, but they're underwater with taxes and inflation and everything else like that. Number 5, the Russians view the whole idea of the New World Order, which they keep citing here, which was a dream of the Bush administration, as relayed forward from occultist Alice A. Bailey and her works from Djwal Khol, the channeled ascended master, as she called him, of the establishment of some kind of a global order, which was the dream of Cecil Rhodes, the Rhodes Scholarships. It was the dream of Colonel House, who was the shadow agent behind Woodrow Wilson in the creation of the League of Nations, and later on, of course, their successors, the United Nations, this global government, this global economic establishment that runs everything for the entire world under the promise of peace. And they understand that this is actually underway, and they have viewed that as a particularly Western phenomenon. Remember that when Malachi Martin wrote his book, The Keys of This Blood, the struggle for world dominion between Pope John Paul II, Mikhail Gorbachev, and the capitalist West. And Malachi admitted to me when he was on the program, the capitalist West really meant the New World Order, the Western order pioneered at the time by the Bushes and the Clintons. So the Russians have understood that this is a Western phenomenon, and they're not necessarily wanting to be any direct part of it. But what also highlights here is that there are internal groups struggling for dominance. Remember I said we're skating across the flats, and as we skate, the various groups see things coming after we get off the flats into the mountainous, turbulent terrain. They are seeing things coming both in the Middle East. We're going to talk a lot about the framework of where everything in the Middle East stands coming up next. As a matter of fact, we'll start that and move into that with Section 6. But at the very same time, the global order. The powers that be understand there's a blowout coming, and they're jockeying for position to be able to be in an advantageous location when it does. And that's what we have to help each other get through, because this is coming, and it's inevitable at this stage. It's just a question of when, how fast, and how bad. Now, I don't necessarily believe that this next election is going to be the last election, but America is going to have to face a lot of serious, hard, painful choices. And if you look at a lot of the discussion surrounding this current election campaigning, you realize how much of it is dealing with delusion. But the reality is going to come home very, very, very shortly. And it's in that reality that a lot of these side causes are just going to get blown to the wayside, because they're going to be more hardcore central issues as to what the country will do to reform itself in order to continue into the future. It's going to be an exciting time. There's no doubt about it. And with God's will, I guess we may be here to comment on it and help you people avoid the rocks and make it through an otherwise rough time. But we can do it because God is our help. We're at steelonsteel.com. I'm John Leffler. Do like us on Facebook. The program is Steel on Steel.
This is